it feels very targeted in that regard. Because
specifically at the Latino community.
Especially at the Latino community, but all the other communities that are also practicing these cultural traditions.
Hey everybody, I'm Sara Sadhwani, and this is the Inside the Issues podcast. My co-host in crime, Alex Cohen, is out this week on a much-deserved break, but we are very fortunate to have the incredible Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez, who has joined us to talk a little bit more about some of the in-depth issues happening here within the city of LA. We have so much to talk about. There's so many things we could be talking about. Right. We're going to focus in a little bit on, of course, the big news out this week, the departure of LAPD Chief Michael Moore. We'll also break down Los Angeles' #1 issue, homelessness, which you happen to know a whole lot about. And of course, I would be remiss to not bring up an issue that has been really popular over the last month or so, rodeos, and the shift between, clash really, between animal rights activists and a push for cultural preservation in both Latino and African American communities. So, Monica, thank you. May I call you Monica?
Of course you can call me Monica.
All right.
That's the name I was given at birth.
Well, welcome again. Thank you so much for stopping by today. Let's jump right in. Last week, there was kind of a shockwave through Los Angeles with the announcement that LAPD Chief Michael Moore would be stepping down at the end of February. There was a press conference that was kind of released. I hadn't known about it. I wasn't aware that this was going to happen. And this, of course, comes at an interesting moment. Just 1 year ago, the LAPD chief had signed on for another 5-year contract, though he had said he would probably serve 2 to 3 years and make sure that there was plenty of time for this transition before we get to the Olympics, which made a whole lot of sense. And so now, this timing kind of came as a really big surprise to everyone. I wanted to hear a little bit from you because you play an incredibly important role in all of this, serving as the chair of the Public Safety Committee. Did this come as a surprise to you? Also, when did you kind of learn about the departure of Chief Moore?
Well, I unfortunately wasn't given a heads up on his decision and the decision for him to conclude his tenure sooner. But, I was, there are struggles in leadership with all leadership. And I think an agency like the Los Angeles Police Department, I've said, is being a leader of that type of organization is as challenging as being a mayor, as challenging as being a council member. It's a position where you can't please everyone. And it requires a lot of difficult choices to be made while honoring and respecting different communities and what their feelings are. And I think Chief Moore has done a very good and, taking on that very challenging role of navigating the nuances and the difficulties associated with that. You're never going to make everyone happy. But I, in our conversations, I said to him, I respect his decision to want to spend more time with his family. It's, I think he said it very beautifully. There's more sand at the bottom of the hourglass than at the top. And when you're reflecting on one's life, I think it's really important to look at, the work will never end. This work is a continuum, and you really have to take stock of what matters in your life. And I think Chief Moore is really reflecting on the fact that he does want to spend greater time with his family, and I totally respect and admire that. He's dedicated over 40 years of his life to serving the people of Los Angeles as chief of police. And he and I have been we've had our struggles and we've had our moments, but there's a mutual respect for the work and understanding that we're both in it to see that the city is well served. And I think he's done a really honorable job given a lot of difficult circumstances that he had to navigate.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree. I mean, even as a working mom, right, it's always a challenge.
Yes.
I could work 20-hour days probably, but at the end of the day, I have kids at home, and finding that balance is never easy for sure. But as you noted, right, these have been some difficult times for Chief Moore. He came into this position in 2018 under Mayor Mayor Eric Garcetti, and has had to preside over the LAPD throughout COVID, throughout a burgeoning homelessness crisis that we'll talk more about, and of course also through the backlash to the George Floyd,
Correct.
And this push to really see reforms within all policing units, and even from some to completely abolish it. There was also, just last month at the end of 2023, LA Times reporting that perhaps something else was amiss. It was reported that perhaps that there were deputies or detectives, I believe it was, who said that Chief Moore had asked them to investigate the Mayor Bass. He, of course, vehemently denied that. Mayor Bass, the timing of all of this certainly came as a surprise to many people. At the press conference last week, Mayor Bass had this to say, however.
He wants to step down at the end of February. I got him to stay a little longer because I feel like having an interim come in without any connection. I mean, I didn't think you would really run to Nashville and we wouldn't hear from you anymore. No. But I did want to secure that through a consulting contract.
So it sounds as though from Karen Bass that Chief Moore will still be sticking around in some capacity to kind of help out with this transition time. Now, as we mentioned, you serve on the Public Safety Committee. You chair that committee. I'm really curious, what are the steps look like from here? Obviously, we're going to need a new chief of police for LAPD. What does that process look like? What role might you play? It is, of course, the mayor who makes that appointment, but do you anticipate being a part of that process?
Well, I'm certainly eager and open to be part of that process, and it is at the discretion of the mayor. She does have oversight, given that she also has the appointment capacity to the police commissioners who are involved in that selection process. And so, for me, I know when Chief Moore was being appointed, and this was in the moments of me as a member of the Public Safety Committee. At the time, I was not chair, but I was also still consulted in terms of the conversations. And so I'm eager to see what this process truly is going to look like. I hope it is inclusive, because there does, we all are leading this city together, and to ensure that we are making thoughtful selection processes, that we are being really reflective of the dynamics of this department. I, again, having now been on the council, I think it's been about 7 years now, it's been, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of shifts. We have been very deeply involved because being on the Public Safety Committee, talking about some of the reforms, talking about the training initiatives and the various efforts for alternatives to policing. These are issues that I am well versed in and have been leading in the city as well. So I hope that there is a role that involves many of the members of the council as well to engage in that conversation, so that we together can help identify the right leader to take the city forward.
And just to clarify, even for me, the process will be that the mayor makes that appointment,
Correct.
But that city council has to approve?
Correct.
Great. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to
Yes, we have a vote.
We have
a vote. We have a vote, and certainly have a vote and a voice in that process.
Yeah.
But it's better to be able to exercise that engagement well in advance of the vote, and that's really important. And so I really hope that is, in fact, part of the process.
Yeah, and no doubt, since Mayor Bass has her whole Locking Arms initiative, that she's going to want to lock arms on an issue that is of so much importance to the city. You talked a little bit about just how challenging it is to lead any organization.
Right.
Just last week, Alex and I had talked, in fact, about so many leadership changes that were happening throughout the city at the Department of Water and Power,
Yes.
at LA Times, even at KCRW. There have been shifts and changes. What kinds of things would you look for in the next chief? What kinds of qualities might they have? Do you anticipate that that's someone who's going to come from within the ranks, much as Chief Moore did? Or, when we look at LAUSD, right? We found someone who came from Miami, who had very different kinds of experiences, but was able to bring them here to LA. Do you have a sense about what
we had an example in Chief Bratton, for example, who was not from the ranks of LAPD, and we've had others. So I think, I've always said that I think, whether internal or external, it's a double-edged sword, because there are feelings among the rank and file as well, in both contexts, depending on what the leadership is. And so, my hope is that the individual who leads this department is someone who is open to having real dialogue, particularly with members of the community who, in many circumstances, have felt impacts of what law enforcement has meant historically in their neighborhoods. Those are very real feelings. And as someone who represents the 7th District, where, for example, Rodney King was beat, there is very real historical context and experiences that need to really be understood and not defensive. But this is about hearing one another. And, people really, in my community, in lots of parts of Los Angeles, we really value and respect the work that law enforcement professionals do. But we have to also acknowledge that reform is a continuum, that we have an obligation to make sure that we are being responsive to the needs of the community and balancing all of the different roles that they have to perform. For me, and I don't know if this is a good segue to talk about homelessness, but, LAPD, for absent comprehensive response, they had to also respond to our homelessness crisis, and that really wasn't the job that they signed up for. So there's a lot of recalibrating assignments and works and roles, and I think the next chief has to understand to some degree the historical context, but also still be a leader that embraces reform and understands that this work is a continuum, because we can reflect and celebrate that LAPD has embraced and been among many law enforcement agencies, among those that have embraced and instituted a great deal of reform, but that work continues.
Absolutely. And, even going back to the 1990s, Connie Rice, who at the time used to be a really big civil rights advocate for police reforms, there was a time period she was really celebrating the changes that LAPD has made from that time period, but there's still more to be
always more to do.
That's right. And that is a great segue, right? Because I would love to talk about some of these other very real issues that the city faces. And of course, one of them, perhaps the most pressing issue here in the city for quite some time now, coming out of the COVID pandemic, has been this issue of homelessness and the vast numbers of folks who are experiencing homelessness. Not only do you chair public safety, but you also serve on the Housing and Homelessness
I've got all the plum assignments.
And you're on the plum committee.
I know. I thankfully got off the plum committee.
Oh, did you? Oh,
I
okay,
did.
Got it. Phew, good. So, there's so much that is happening here. There has been so much ink spilled, I think, in the last year about the mayor's Inside Safe program. But I would love to talk with you a little bit about one of the other sort of looming issues here in the city is this lawsuit from the LA Alliance. This came about some years ago. Local business owners and residents from Los Angeles were really pushing to say, hey, the city and the county need to uphold their responsibility to ensure that there is a healthy environment for all, including both the housed and the unhoused. There's been a lot of back and forth. The city, and please correct me if I get any of this wrong, but the city engaged with the court, with Judge Carter, who presided over this. And of course, for those who are in the know, Judge Carter has played this incredible role holding court in Skid Row, taking folks down to Skid Row, really bringing a spotlight to this crisis that we are facing. The city negotiated a settlement with the court quite some time ago, settling on creating 20,000 beds, both permanent and some temporary as well. And and the county, and we can talk about this in just a moment, initially only said that they would do 300 beds, in stark contrast. But I'm really curious about the LA Alliance settlement. And here's where we're going to get really wonky.
Okay.
LA Alliance settlement it gets complicated. And then Inside Safe, which we hear a whole lot about. Inside Safe is the mayor's program when she came in to get folks off the streets immediately, largely putting folks into temporary housing, hotels, etc. How do these two programs interact with one another? Because we're spending millions of dollars on both of these initiatives. Are the goals of these programs aligned? And what, I mean, as taxpayers, what do we also need to kind of be aware of in terms of how this money is getting spent? And are we meeting these ultimate goals of ending and solving this crisis,
right,
and recognizing also that there might be short-term and long-term goals?
Right. And I fully respect the mayor's effort to really, insurge a sense of immediacy that we need to remove individuals off the street. And particularly when she took office, we were having severe extreme weather conditions, a lot of cold. And so we had to accelerate, encouraging people to take shelter.
Right.
And so that was the impetus for the emergency order. What I've been advocating for consistently from that, from the inception, is that the goals need to be aligned, because this is a federal contract, a federal case that says that we have to provide this number of housing units. A lot of residents want to see closure. We continue to infuse resources to clear some of the same encampments over and over and over again. And when, what this does is it provides a legal protection for 4118, which is the anti-camping ordinance. And so what the Alliance case says is that we have to provide for at least 60% of the population, the housing units, as well as, the options to be able to offer housing for individuals that are unhoused. Now, unfortunately, there hasn't been really clear alignment with the goals of Inside Safe, along with the Alliance case, in fulfilling those numbers, because we have to have beds that are contractually obligated and available through 2027 for them to be contributing to meeting the Alliance goals. Thus far, that has not been reflected in what the numbers of the units that have been secured under Inside Safe have fulfilled. And so I have been advocating very strongly and very passionately about our obligation to meet those goals. That is, it's what we're gonna have our feet held to the fire, and failure to do this is going to actually have implications for the city, either financial, punitive action taken either by financial or whatever other means that the judge orders us. So, this is a federal consent decree. As much as people don't want to talk about it, that this is a federal intervention to say, the City of Los Angeles, this is what you have to do, and you have to do it by this timeline. And it is all of our responsibilities to make sure that we fulfill those targets and meet those goals. And not just because of this is a huge humanitarian crisis. Yeah. We are all on deck to help fulfill that obligation, and we all need to have our feet held to the fire. Yeah. I think the part that I was most appreciative of is that the court went further to engage the county, because we know that so many of the unhoused are suffering from mental health and substance abuse issues that the city is just not equipped to do. Right. That is all within the wheelhouse of the county. And so, yes, the 300 were woefully insufficient to the need on the streets of Los Angeles, but 3,000 is still rather small. Well, and people need to understand that that's not completely exclusive to serving the needs of the city of Los Angeles. Yes, we do have the largest population and concentration of homeless in the city of Los Angeles, but the county is much larger than the city of Los Angeles. Sure. And so 3,000 beds could be tapped by other cities within the county. And we have 87 other cities in the county of Los Angeles. So it really is incumbent upon us, in order for us to make maximum use of that opportunity, to get organized, to make sure that that we are fulfilling the obligations under the Alliance case, starting to get those beds online and fulfill we have 13,000 beds that we still need to fulfill as part of our this
And those are
agreement.
temporary, or those are permanent beds?
It's
either.
beds, right?
Okay.
It's beds. So, and it has to be available at a minimum through 2027. So the city, I mean, I've built permanent supportive housing. I have interim. I have a whole variety, emergency shelter as well. So it's meeting all of those different needs, because at some point, what your hope is some people just need the temporary reprieve so that they can get back on their feet and meet their permanent solution. So it's not always an assumption that everyone goes into PSH. There are many families. There are a variety of circumstances.
PSH being?
Permanent supportive housing. I know.
No.
I know. Government like wonk speak. Yes.
I told you we were going to get wonky.
I know. I try to avoid government speak. I'm always. It's real easy to fall into the acronym
Absolutely.
speak. Yeah.
Well, and you've talked about this level of coordination that is necessary. Clearly, that means between city council, county, the mayor's office as well. I want to take a moment, and just in last week in a Housing and Homelessness Committee, you had said this about a report that you were receiving, I believe, about the Inside Safe program. And let's take a listen.
For me, it's about as clear as mud. So I'm trying to make sure that, again, perhaps how we can do a better job of reporting these things out. Much of that also comes by not missing 3 previous opportunities to have these reports and these engagements, so that we could perhaps have better clarity as we're in the process of doing it. Because here we are getting ready, fast-tracked a conversation to replenish all the resources that have been expended. We just learned just on Friday how much it's costing us, and it's still, for all the money that we're expending with respect to Inside Safe, it's not advancing the obligations that we have to meet the compliance goals and targets associated with the alliance settlement. I think, again, it goes back to I want to make sure that we are fulfilling our obligations. That what was frustrating to me is that when we were scheduling these items, the reports from the mayor's office to come back to committee, for some reason in committee, it was we would, quote, run out of time, and we would and that happened in this committee report. This report to our committee, which is part of the accountability piece, was pushed 3 separate occasions. And so I also communicated in that committee meeting in Homelessness Committee that if we are not going to hear these items in committee, then it needs to go to the full council, but we're not going to give a pass to hearing these conversations, because this council could be influential in recalibrating what is being done, how monies are being spent, because we still have to ultimately give the approval for replenishment of additional dollars to the mayor's office for their use of these dollars for Inside Safe.
Yeah. A lot of money floating around. Monica, we usually do a segment here on the Inside the Issues podcast called What's the Word? And the word this week is?
Transparency.
Transparency. And I feel like that maybe is applying to what you're saying here, right?
Yes.
Is that you're looking for greater transparency on...
I'm looking for things that are clearer than mud. I don't want people, numbers should be it's linear. It should be very clear. We pay X amount of dollars, we get X amount of results. Yeah. And that has not been portrayed. I hear figures like we're getting 91% of 215 of 500% of this. It's not very clear. It feels like 3-card Monty when these reports come in, and that's infuriating to me. So just as any taxpayer, just as any resident would expect, just layman's terms, just give it to me. What are we getting for this? And when it's never really fully clear, it causes me great consternation to say yes to more resources for something that is not very clear to me.
Last month, the council took on an issue that I have to be honest, I wasn't thinking a whole lot about, and that's the issue of rodeos. The council was about to ban rodeos altogether. There was a movement to do so. And just before council met, you appeared outside to great fanfare opposing this ban. It was really interesting. It seems to be a clash between animal rights activists activists on the one hand who say that animals in these rodeos are being mistreated and it's animal cruelty. And on the other hand, a number of communities of color, the Latino community, of course, but also even African-American communities who have a long kind of historical relationship with rodeo, and Native American communities saying, hey, wait, this is an important component to our culture. I was so interested in all of this, in part because the proposed ban came from your colleague, Councilmember Bob Blumenfield from the West Valley. You're, of course, bringing this backlash from the East Valley. So it was really this clash in the Valley. Help us understand this issue and break down what's really at play here.
So what we adopted on council as a result of the pushback was sending this back to committee so that we can have another go at this. The way this issue has devolved, I will say, is that it first started with eliminating certain tools being used in equestrian-related activities. Well, that had far greater implications to even greater cultural events like Escaramuza, and it was very selective because it would have exempted activities like polo or dressage.
That's interesting.
And so, right. So it begs the question, it feels very targeted in that regard. Because
specifically at the Latino community.
Especially at the Latino community, but all the other communities that are also practicing these cultural traditions. And so when you look at when the animal rights activists and everyone's advocating, for the protection of animals, no one's advocating for the harm of animals in these practices. In fact, they they go to great lengths and expense to protect these animals. I know because I represent the largest equine keeping and ranch properties in the city of Los Angeles. So I'm very familiar with it. Policy making is supposed to be inclusive and not be serving at the detriment to one group over another. And unfortunately, this process has felt very much like this. Because if we were going to have a real conversation about most recently what has had the greatest harm to animals, we would also be having a conversation about horse racing. We saw a lot of animals being put down consistently. And so why? No one's waking up in the city of Los Angeles with all of our issues being like, gosh, all our problems would be solved if we just banned rodeos. Right. We have a lot of real heavy issues to be grappling with. And so this just feels very targeted, and it feels very misaligned to what the biggest concerns are. And particularly when, PBR, a rodeo activity organized by the African American community that has long history and traditions here in Los Angeles, that is a huge boon to our local economy. And so you would think that there would be more reflections about inclusivity, making sure that we're respecting our historical traditions, because we can all, everyone has a cultural practice that perhaps we may not agree with, that could have religious implications or what have you. Are we picking winners and losers of whose culture gets to be protected in the city of Los Angeles? And on this issue, and particularly as an American, first-generation American of Mexican descent, it feels like an attack.
Yeah, especially when Latinos make up nearly the population,
half the population of the city, and this is a rich cultural tradition and practice. And as I said, we do a lot with the charros in my district, and organizing them to be more responsive to fire safety concerns and evacuations. And so they deeply, deeply love these animals. And so it's frustrating when you have individuals that are targeting these issues. And I understand and respect people's passion for it, but at the same time, it shouldn't be punitive to another community's cultural practice.
That is right. And I think so many times people often forget that here within the city boundaries, that there is very rural sorts of areas, the large equestrian community that you, of course, serve. So thank you so much for bringing light to all of these issues.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez, thank you so much for coming in today. That's all for us today. Thanks so much for checking out the show. You can watch us, of course, wherever you get your podcasts, but of course also on the Spectrum News app. We're also available on YouTube. You can also check us out on social media. Tell us what you think. I'm available at Sara Sadhwani, and no doubt you also are available online as well. That's it for today. Thanks so much.
The Inside the Issues podcast is a Spectrum News One production. Crystal Goss is our producer. Our senior digital producer is Yasmin Cruz. Nathaniel Leathers is our editor, and the executive in charge of production is Daisy Espinoza.